I think the coolest thing about the culinary profession is that you just can't fake it.
Oh.
Like, I just think, like, if you're not a good cook, everybody's going to know.
Oh, wow.
And you'll be ostracized. And I think it's one of these things that, like, people really love it. Like, you have to love this thing. Like, there's just no way around it. Like, you don't get paid enough. You work really long hours. If you don't love food and if you don't love hospitality, like, you are not going to make it a long time. It just wears on you. Like, it's, you know, the progression of getting older and moving away from roles of, you know, not banging on the line every day when you're like, it is just a hard job. So it was reassuring in that sense that I'm just like, all the people that are here actually want to be here, and the people that are not here, they just don't. They don't last very long.
I Am Consciously Curious, a podcast for those that are searching for meaning and fulfillment in their lives. My name is Victor Chan, and I'm on a mission to find out why people do what they do. I've interviewed white-collar to blue-collar, entrepreneurs to passion projects, and life is just too short to not produce meaningful work. Thanks for tuning in. All right.
Sure.
We're here. We're live.
Amazing.
Chef Francis.
That's me.
You would have been guest number 3 out of 4 this week. You are 2 out of 4, or 2 out of 3 this week. One of them unfortunately canceled.
Yeah.
But I haven't done like 4 in a week, and I feel like I need a day to almost decompress because of how sometimes deep we go in these episodes. I'm not complaining. I'm just like, I guess, maybe I'm just venting, I guess.
Yeah.
But this is the first time I'm meeting you.
Yeah.
And like you said, like you admire how, I'm not even from the culinary background, and I owe a lot of my curiosity and interest in culinary and hospitality through a friend, Jason Chan, who just opened Gav Roach, and he officiated my wedding.
Oh, amazing.
So it wasn't until post-college, late 20s, when I started exploring just the city in general and its eclectic culinary scene. And you're not also the first private chef that that has come into my purview. I haven't met Chef Simon Davies either. But I do love the fact that you've been able to create something of your own after feeling ready, and I'm excited to dive into that journey as well. And then trying to maybe from the inside or in your own ways change the culture if there was something wrong about the culture from your own experience. Sure. But that being said, I feel like there was a time before the kitchen, before cooking. There was.
Shoot, I guess kind of and kind of not really. You know, like pretty much outside of high school, I kind of got into cooking. Yeah. It was one of those things where, like, you know, I did pretty well in high school. I have foreign parents, so it was kind of like mandatory. And
I only found one article. You moved here when you were 10?
I moved here,
Albania?
Yeah. I was basically 11, almost 11.
Okay.
Yeah.
And Chicago, though?
We were, like, in Addison, so it's, like, right. And then so we were there for, like, 1 year and then moved to Glendale Heights, which is, like, the town right next over, like, kind of western suburbs. Okay. Probably, I don't know, 25 minutes right outside of the city. Yeah. So we were coming to the city a lot still. And then I moved here officially in, like, 2012, like, to right outside of high school. Yeah.
Okay. For work or for school?
For work, really. I mean, I was dating a girl at the time that was going to culinary school, and it was just one of these things where, like, you know, like I was saying, like, you know, I feel like every kind of foreign family is, like, very hard on their kids in terms of, like, you know, wanting to build a better future for them and going to college and et cetera. And, like, you know, despite having done decent in high school, because I was pushed to do so, like, I really had no interest in being in school. Like, it's just not how I personally learn. Like, I can't just sit down and learn in that sense, and, like, I really need to be active, which is why I think, like, the culinary world really kind of helped me out.
And then you had a home ec? You had a cooking class?
I did, but even then, man, like, you know, it's like I grew up in a very traditional kind of society in Albania, right, where it's just like, you know, the men would go to work, the women were staying at home.
I still imagine the trades. Like, would you be surprised if you ended up in a trade union, like in some sort of like pipe fitter, bricklaying, painting?
Yeah. No, not at all. So I just grew up in that setting of, like, you know, spending a lot of time with, like, my grandparents and, like, the ladies who were staying at home. You know, by the time I was born, my mom was also working, but, like, I never really had to cook, right? It's just like my grandparents or my mom, like they cooked, you know, breakfast, lunch, dinner. Like I never really had to do that. I would help out with like small projects, but it was never a thing where I was like, oh, like I'm going to be a chef someday. Like, you know, if I look back now, I could see myself, you know, watching all the Iron Chef episodes and like watching No Reservations with Anthony Bourdain and just like being so interested in it. But like I couldn't have told you at that time that I was like, oh, like I'm gonna be a chef and this is what I want to do for the rest of my life. Now that's what I told my parents, you know, when they were like, you know, you got to go to college. Like, what is the thing that you're gonna be doing? And like, you know, I ended up going to a local college for, God, maybe a semester. I mean, I was just totally screwing around. I didn't want to be there,
just to appease them,
just to appease them, and then eventually just dropped out. Didn't even tell them. And like I was saying, I was, you know, dating this girl at the time that was going to culinary school, and I moved out here to the city with her, and you know, strangely enough, we were living in Lakeview at the time, and we went to get breakfast at this place, and I look in the kitchen and I see my friend whose name is James Taylor, and I'd known him from high school. I'd known him from, you know, middle school. I'd known him for a long time, and very randomly, like, saw him in the kitchen. I was like, what's going on, man? Like, you know, can I come stage, right? Like, I had just no idea, right? And then he got me a job there, and like 2 weeks later, he was gone, like to work at another spot. So like, just kind of filled in that position and was just so green and knew nothing. And then a couple of months later, the guy that owned the place, used to be the maitre d' at a place called Japonais. So he like got me a stage there. Yeah. If you remember that spot a billion years ago. So that was really like my first restaurant job. Yeah.
What do you remember about your time at the diner?
I just remember it. Well, it was kind of a mess, to be honest with you. Like, based on what I ended up.
Was anyone mentoring you?
No, not really. I mean, it was all like, it was a lot of, you know, Latinos. The place was crazy. It was always booked on the weekends. And I just, you know, remember it being so crazy. I remember being so hungry and just like wanting to be there kind of thing. But I remember specifically the guy working the egg station, and just like he had these mounds of tickets coming in all the time, right? And just was like not looking at any of them, just purely listening to calls.
Wow.
And it's like, but that's what it is, right? Where I'm like, I feel like I would tell any young cook, like, you should go work at a diner, like go work the egg station at a diner. Like, that is so hard, right? They're doing eggs a billion different ways, a bunch of different omelets with all of these different ingredients, and they're not even like looking at tickets, right? Like, they're just flying things out. I mean, you know, you can look at, you know, doing recipes that have, you know, hydrocolloids or whatever, like to make sauces stronger, etc. But if I think about this guy, Tomas, is doing giant batches of hollandaise over a double boiler, I'm like, what a skill set to have, right? And like, without breaking it, like, it's a lot of money, you can't mess it up. And so I remember that specifically, of just being so impressed that this guy was just banging out on the line.
Being in awe of how professional one can be.
Yeah.
Were there any instances prior to that of that level of professionalism?
No, and I wouldn't even say like that was a crazy level of professionalism. You know what I mean? Like, it was a mom and pop place. Like, it was it wasn't really all that crazy. You know, I ended up working at other restaurants that had very different kind of standards down the line.
There are levels to this,
yeah, there's
right?
definitely levels to it. But I remember that specific part of just like, you know, being a consumer for the first, you know, going from being a consumer to kind of being on the back end of things. And like, when people think about a restaurant, like, all they think about is that like a plate lands in front of them.
Right.
But they don't think about how much work it took for that to get there. And so like, I didn't even understand the fact of like, oh, there's different stations that, like, you know, there's a saute, there's a fryer, there's a, you know, a grill, right? Like, and all of them have 5 dishes or whatever it may be that they're responsible for. And I like finally just started to get this like this interest for it. And I knew that I was gonna fall in love with it from the beginning, right? Like, I grew up in Albania. You know, when I was growing up, it was kind of like the aftermath of like the communist regime. Like, I grew up in a very kind of militant environment. And so like, order and regulation and that structure was always a part of my life since I was a kid. Like, I was never allowed to sleep in, and I always had to do chores and you know, be a part of you know, kind of helping the family out. And on top of that, I played soccer for all of my life. I mean, if you're not from the US, like, you play soccer, it's just it's a part of it. So like, winning together is a very big thing for me too. And so like, that's why I was like, man, this like brigade thing, this system of restaurants that is, you know, that has kind of like this structure of a hierarchy, and also like the team aspect. I was hooked, man, right away. I was in. So
yeah. I gotta say, yeah, like, so getting where I'm at, I get a small peek behind the curtain of like your life and the work you do, and whether it's a food, beverage, or product or service. When I later on experience that, it's this appreciation, this deep, like newfound deep appreciation for that. That's my favorite aspect of doing this, and why I continue to do that. So that team mentality, did you get to work for certain stations for a period amount of time before moving on at that diner?
Yeah. Oh, well, kind of there. I mean, I did like the waffle station because it was literally called waffles. So I did that. I worked the X station, but again, like, I was only there for like 3 months before I was like, okay, like I need to go. I need to go somewhere where I'm like.
So within 3 months, you felt ready?
No, God. Well,
like you had that itch to move on?
Yeah, for sure. I knew that that's not like where I necessarily wanted to be. I just needed experience. Like I just needed to get my foot in the door. But I knew that I wanted to work at a different kind of caliber of restaurant, especially because, you know, the person that I was dating, like they were going to culinary school, and I'm looking at their books, and I'm like learning about all these people like Escoffier, Pablo Cus, etc. And I'm like, I'm reading these books, right? And I'm just like, man, like I want to be in these environments. Like these things look so cool. And, you know, admittingly, like I was 18, young, and
you were hungry though.
And super hungry.
Sounds like you were hungry.
Super hungry, and like, and honestly pompous, right? Like I think, you know, and I say this humbly, but like I had just been pretty good at most things that I had done in my life up until that point, and so I was just like, I felt like I was ready. I felt like I wanted more, until you get placed in a place like a you know, a real kitchen, and you're like, oh shoot, like I kind of suck at this thing. In a way, but I was really hungry. I just wanted to be there. And at the time, like, you know, restaurants are still like, you know, you could work for free if you wanted to. And so like, to kind of give you some perspective, it's like when I got this like stage to go work at Japonais, like I showed up and I didn't even have a knife, right? And so I showed up, and the chef at the time, his name was Chris Park, who ended up later becoming, you know, a good friend, but also my roommate. You know, like I showed up, and he's like, all right, fine, like here's my knife, and like here's these chives, and he's like, cut these chives. And then, you know, I cut the chives, and he walked away. I cut the chives, and I was like, man, these aren't fine enough, and so I just minced them. And he came back and just laughed at me, and but still gave me the job, right? And it wasn't a paid job; it was an internship for a couple of months, and every day I would have to come in. He'd give me one potato, and I'd have to show a bunch of different knife cuts to him every day.
Oh, wow.
And then eventually I ended up getting a job, got on like the easiest station. I can't even remember the name of it specifically, but just like cold station, right?
Yeah.
Ended up moving to, you know, the fry, the saute, grill, etc. And then stayed there through, we reconcepted as Japanese by Morimoto. So it got taken over by Morimoto. And like I said, like loved Iron Chef. He was somebody that I really liked at that point. And so I stayed there.
This sounds like school. Like,
it's exactly
did that
school.
ever dawn on you? Like
100%. I knew it.
Should I be going to school, or should I just be seeking kitchen experiences?
I knew that from the bat. Like the way that I've always looked at it was that I had no money. I had nowhere to be. Like I'd left my parents' house, and like they were very strict. And so like for the first time I was like pumped to be able to do whatever that I wanted to do at any time. And I'm hanging out with these like 40-year-olds in like a freaking pirate ship, which is kind of what like back of house life is. But I did look at it like school, right? Like on my days off, I had nothing to do, quote unquote. So I would either go stage at other places, or I would just like get a sack of potatoes and just like cut stuff at home. But I always knew that I'm just like, okay, I'm not getting paid a lot of money. And like, I really wasn't, right? Like I'd have to go in and clock in at a certain time, but I'd probably be there for like 6 hours before then, like just learning how to do prep stuff just because I wanted to be there.
Sure.
But I was like, I get paid to work with food that I otherwise could not afford, with equipment that I could not otherwise afford, and the people around me are just so much better than me. And you know, to your point that I think we were talking about this before we went live, was like, you know, are there parts of the industry that are good or bad or et cetera? And just like there certainly are, right? Like I don't believe in kind of berating or belittling people or any of that notion, but like holding people accountable and being in an environment where people are holding you accountable, I think is just so important. And for me, it's like, because I want to succeed with the team, I don't have to be number one always. I just need my team to win. And so like when there's this like, environment that kind of like needs you to perform in order for like everybody else to win, you feel that pressure of like wanting to be there and wanting to get better. So I really enjoyed that aspect where I was like, man, I am in school. Like I get to just learn from people that are way better than me.
No, all of that makes so much sense. Like the actions that you impart have meaning and they're valuable, and you feel like you're part of a collective at that point. With the current generation that's trying to get their feet wet in the industry, do you feel like, and it's not a bad thing when they prioritize mental health and their well-being and not having to work 70, 80-hour work weeks, that should be a priority. But do you feel like that there's not a balance with the level of hunger that or desire to do this work?
I just think that I think people need to be really honest with themselves. I think that's all that it is for me. Like me personally, I don't want to do nothing else. I've never wanted to do anything else. Like from the moment that I knew it, like that's what I want to do. Like I feel like I have this conversation quite often, right? Because like I'm like, okay, like there's a lot of people like now that we have a decent following on social media and stuff, like there's a lot of young cooks that reach out to us and ask for advice on these sorts of things. And like in a hypothetical world, I wish that I could just like give them a piece of paper and a pen and just say, tell me all the things that you really like doing, right? And I could just see people saying, I like going to the park, I like going to the beach, I like going to the movies, I like doing this, I like doing that. And I'm like, that's fine. You should be honest with yourself and say, I really like doing these things. And I also want to work at a restaurant where I can work 40 hours a week and then I can do these things. But for me, I don't want to do any of that. I don't want to party. I don't want to chill. I don't want to go to the movies. I don't want to go to the park. I don't want to go to the beach. I like working. That's me, right? And so it's not a matter of hunger or not. Like there's like this idea in the Western world, especially like within American culture, that you have to be number one or that you're not relevant. And it's just not true. Like you could maybe be a really good number two. Or a really good number 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 or 7. Like it doesn't matter. Like you don't, like this idea that you have to be really hungry or super passionate about your, like
it's definitely a Western like, individualistic
for sure
culture.
Like but that's what I mean. And like that's the part, like it's not like that I love everything about communism, but like growing up in that environment and like unknowingly kind of getting these things my way where it's just like I just want to participate, right? And as long as we're moving forward and everyone collectively is winning, like I'm fine with that. Like there's times in which I have to step up and be a leader, and then there's times when I'm like, I'm working with a sous chef and like I'm now their sous chef. Like I'll clean up after them if it means that they're successful, because what matters is our mission. So I really think people just need to be honest with themselves about what they want and like kind of just discard this idea that like, oh, you have to be at a certain level of hunger.
You said it before we went live that you can have anything you want.
Yeah.
Right? But you have to like pick one thing.
Yeah. I just believe that to my core, man. Like you can have anything you want. Like I believe every human is just so capable of a very unique capability. Like anybody, anywhere can be anything that they want. And I know that sounds insane, right? Like granted, you have some things like you can't be LeBron James because you're not 6'7". Like fine, so you won't play in the NBA, but outside of that, like I just think of things as like skills and anybody can acquire them. So I would focus more on that.
The greater good.
Yeah.
And we'll get to this point eventually, but you're in a position to affect culture.
Am I? I don't look at it that way, man. I'm just like,
well, I mean, but there will be a point where the team, it kind of like takes itself, right?
Yeah.
But you're in a, like people look to you as a leader, right?
Yeah,
so
sure.
You set it in motion, and then momentum will happen.
Yeah.
Right. So what were some memorable moments at Japonais?
God, some memorable moments at Japonais.
Or formative.
I mean, like, I think. God, I'm trying to think of like.
And at that time, like, did you have to pick up another job to pay the bills? Like, how was that dynamic with your girlfriend
it's crazy.
at the time?
Yeah, I mean, like, her parents were helping her pay her rent while she was going to school and that kind of thing. So like, I was just staying with them, and like, whatever little money I was getting, like, I was just, I was helping put that way. But like outside of that, like, I mean, I had like a export membership, and I would take showers there, and then like I would eat staff meal, and then like I just wouldn't do anything else, right? Like. There was a moment after we split up in which I was just staying in my car. Like I just, like, I'm telling you, like I love my parents to death. Like I love the sacrifice that they made for me. But during my teenage years, while I was so like rebellious in a way, I was just like, I would do anything to just not be there. So if I was couch surfing or sleeping in my car, like it didn't matter to me. I felt so free. And just like I just had such a purpose for the first time, and I just wanted to be there so badly, dude. Like I would if I was sick, I would show up, and I'd rather have you send me home than like not show up or do anything else. Like I just like to this day, I'm just like I just want to work. I just want to be there. I just want to share things with people that I care about. Like,
well, no one can tell you anything if you don't live under their roof.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
What was the future that your parents envisioned for you? School at that time?
Yeah, for sure. Everybody wants you to be a doctor or a lawyer, right? And I get it, right? Like, the way that I think about my parents' situation, right, is like, imagine being 40 years old or 42, whatever they were at the time, and like leaving everything that you've ever known, right? You're coming from a place where everyone looks like you, speaks your language, right? Like they grew up in a time where nobody could even leave the country. And then there was, the genocide after the breakup of Yugoslavia. So like, I was born right in like the middle and kind of almost aftermath of that as well. And so like they're uprooting their entire lives, moving to a place where they don't know anybody. Like we didn't know anyone here. They didn't even tell us until like a week before we left that we were leaving, right? And so like we leave with whatever little things that we have. They're leaving all their friends, all their family behind to come here and give you a better life, right? And it's like, for me, it's almost like a waste to let that go down the drain. So I've always had that in the back of my mind, and it just makes sense, right? Like they're not doing it because they're like, oh, I will, hopefully someday you make it so big that all of a sudden I get rich off of that. Like they just want you to have a better life.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of parents will.
Did it take a while for you to come to that realization?
I feel like, I knew it, right? Like I could see it. Like I knew that from the beginning, right? Like I think of these like years, especially in the beginning, right? Where it's like, we had a decent life in Albania in terms of like social structure, right? Like we had tons of family around. And obviously it was a very poor country, but like, growing up, I didn't really know that because we were all poor. And so,
it's relative,
and again, like, in a communist kind of situation where it's like everyone kind of has this similar resources. So it's like, I never knew that. But like they came here, they were both in finance, accounting and banking, et cetera. And, they came here and all of a sudden their degrees did not transfer in the same way. So now they're 40 some years old. Starting over. They don't speak the language. They're doing cleaning jobs and they never once complained about it. I mean, like so like when you bring up the thing about people not being hungry or whatever it is and et cetera, like we were just talking about this right before we started too, where it's just like, there's parts of it that you love and there's parts of it that you don't love. And they're like, these people never complained. Like they just got it done. And I really like, if anyone's listening to this, I really hope that you understand this thing where it's like, I'm the first person in my family to be able to pursue meaning. Like
what a luxury.
Yeah. Like I swear to God, like I think people do not understand that. Like your parents, your grandparents, your great grandparents, like they did not pursue meaning. They purely just survived. They got up, they did a job, and they went home. Either
to be born location specific in this generation, in this time, or to have parents that sacrifice this trip to leave a certain area to go to a new area.
Dude, it's
with an unknown of like a hope, a prospect of something better.
That's what I mean. Like completely just hope. I mean, like I catch myself, complaining about the business not moving fast enough or like me not like, cause I'm just so hungry all the time that I want to push it so hard that I'm just like, slow down for a second and just like see the kind of where we've been and how far we've gotten. But I'm just like, man, like life is still happening either way. So definitely grateful for their sacrifice for sure.
Oh, wow. Would you attribute the amount of time you spent learning and working to are you no longer with that girlfriend?
No.
So, right. Like I hear it all the time, how tough the strain is on whether it's friendships, relationships with your parents or love interests. Like it's just, I can't imagine how hard that is to juggle everything when you're trying to make it for yourself.
Yeah, for sure. And like it definitely makes all of those relationships really difficult, right? Like the dating life is incredibly difficult, right? Like I think a lot of people like somebody that's ambitious until you actually get around them and you're like, dude, I actually don't see you all that much, right? And so like, and then, the same thing with the friendships. It's like all the friends that I knew from middle school or high school, like I have practically no relationships with any of them anymore. Maybe like a couple, right, that I see from time to time. But the people that I worked with in restaurants, like they're my family, and I've been with them for 12 years now. Like they're people that I can count on and I can call on. Especially at some of the other restaurants that I worked at after that, where like I feel like I stayed longer and got more deeper and more meaningful relationships out of it.
Yeah, it seemed I get the sense that you're very observant, and so like when you were starting at Japonais, like what did you tend to observe as far as the team dynamics or things that the skills that you were trying to pick up?
You know what, man? I think the coolest thing about Japonais was the fact that it was such an old school brigade system. Like I think, I ended up working for the Alinea Group later on, and I think when people think of like the 3-star thing, like, I didn't work there and I worked at Roister, but I mean like when people think of that kind of caliber of thing, like they think of just, kind of modifying food in a way that's like, the gels and the foams and et cetera, right? But like at a place like Japonais, like we cooked everything from raw. And I mean, it was a 5-scene restaurant. There was times in like where you would do 1,000 covers, right? Like it was such a classic brigade system that I was just like, dude, like I'm a systems person. I'm a systems and operations person. Okay. So like for me, I was hooked on that fact where I was like, these people come in at this time in the morning, they get these things done. There's prep lists, there's people checking these things all along the way. There's 2 people on each station, one's cooking, one's plating, there's an entrepreneur, there's somebody calling the tickets. Like that part I loved so much because like it's so reliant
clear roles and responsibilities.
Yeah, and it's just so reliant on the communication aspect where it's just like you will screw up everybody else if you mess up your stuff, right? Another thing that I thought was very distinct, and thanks for always circling back because I'll just ramble on. Sure. But one thing that I remember very distinctly was one of the sous chefs, his name was Sia. And he had a very interesting way of calling people out, which was instead of just like screaming at them, he would like kind of poke fun at them and make fun of them a little bit and just like, really, man, you're gonna serve that? Like, dude, that looks fucking bad, dude. Like, and so like I always saw that as a way that and like everyone loved him. To this day, like all the places that he worked at, like he's one of the favorite people that works at that restaurant. And so like I think I really took that away. I don't know that I ended up adopting it until way later on in my life. But I look back at it now and just being like, oh man, like, yeah, that was a good way of doing it, right? Because nobody wants to be called out.
No, but did he have a way of balancing it with positive feedback?
Yeah, for sure. Because he was just so cool, right? Like, I don't know, I was 18. He was probably, 25, 26 at the time. And he was just so cool the rest of the time that you were just like, oh yeah, like he's definitely my favorite sous chef. Because there was definitely like a good cop, bad cop. Yeah. There was definitely the chefs that were not as nice, but.
Yeah, that in and of itself, being around adults. Yeah. Adulting at that age. Yeah. What a crash course.
For sure.
And life can seem like it's moving a million miles an hour.
Yeah.
In the kitchen, especially.
Yeah, for sure. I actually remember having very specific thoughts in terms of, like, I had an older sibling, and so like and they were 4 years older than I was, and so like in middle school I hung out with high schoolers because I had to, right? Because my parents were working all the time, and they're like, you have to take your little brother with you. And so like I hung out with high schoolers when I was in middle school, and then while I was in high school I hung out with college kids. And so there was always like, I was hanging out with people that were 4 years older kind of all the time, but all of a sudden I'm 18 and like I'm rooming with a 40-year-old, right? Like I'm hanging out with 40-year-olds, like I'm sneaking into bars, right? Yeah. And I'm not even 21, and I'm hanging out with grown folks, like nowhere near my parents, nowhere near anything that I knew. I mean, a really different kind of perspective on life, for sure.
It was reassuring. It was like reaffirming to like, this is what I want to do. This lifestyle. It's not just the work, but the people in it, the lifestyle.
I think the coolest thing about the culinary profession is that you just can't fake it. Oh. Like, I just think, like, if you're not a good cook, everybody's going to know. Oh, wow. and you'll be ostracized. And I think it's one of these things that, like, people really love it. Like, you have to love this thing. Like, there's just no way around it. Like, you don't get paid enough. You work really long hours. If you don't love food and if you don't love hospitality, like, you are not going to make it a long time. It just wears on you. Like, it's, the progression of... Yeah. Getting older and moving away from roles of, not banging on the line every day when you're like, it is just a hard job. So it was reassuring in that sense that I'm just like, all the people that are here actually want to be here. And the people that are not here, they just don't, they don't last very long. And I strive to work at restaurants that were like that.
I like that a lot. I like that. Yeah. It's a good filter.
Yeah.
So at that time when you were learning and working, how often would you remain in contact with your parents, despite not living, in the burbs?
Yeah, my dad not a whole ton. I think like they tried.
Because I'm sure they worried.
They did, and like it was almost like I wouldn't say I was like a disgrace kind of thing. Like my sister was like perfect, right? Like just did really well on her ACTs, went to DePaul got, blah, blah, all this stuff. And so like, I was kind of like the opposite. And so like, I feel like they really tried those first couple of years, and it wasn't until they saw that like I was good, like on my own. Every parent wants that.
What does that mean though? Did you have a title? Did you like were able to pay your own bills?
Yeah. Like that sort of thing. They're like, okay, like you have some stability. Yeah. Like it wasn't like, like you're blah, blah, blah. Like it was just more of like, okay, like you're good. With my dad, like I still don't have a really close kind of relationship with him, which is totally fine. But, my mom, I do for sure. And like that always kind of stayed around, but, they would check in, but I think like I just got more and more and more involved in my own life that like, I think I just stopped talking to everybody. I mean, I was just so obsessed with just being there.
That's wild.
Yeah.
I mean, you're obviously okay with it.
I am. I love it more than anything.
Or is there a point where you think you'd want to play catch up, where you become happy with your professional life and you're just trying to make amends?
I think about it, but I don't feel like I'm missing out on a whole lot. And like, I love them to death. I mean, like that's such a other conversation. You know what I mean? Like that's more of like a therapy session. Not to say that there's not, value there, but I think like, your listeners will get more out of kind of the culinary aspect of it. But like for me, I was just so sure about the things that I wanted out of life that like everything else just kind of didn't matter. And I don't feel bad about, like I say these things so that people know them, but I never cared. Like people would just be like, you're going to miss holidays, you're going to miss weekends, you're going to miss partying, right? Like I personally didn't care.
Reminds me of Alex Hormozy.
Dude, Hormozy, if you ever see this or if we ever meet, I fucking love you. But yeah, and so I listen to his stuff all the time, and for this exact reason, right? Because I'm just like, dude, like it just makes sense to me. Like I dig this stuff. No, I don't think so. I mean,
okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I ask these things. There's definitely common themes amongst the recent episodes, but the guests become a sounding board for me.
Yeah.
And I'm always looking for ways to improve my relationship with my parents.
Yeah.
So I appreciate you sharing.
Yeah. Yeah. I do think that, in a way, I think in the back of my mind, unconsciously, I'm like doing this thing where I'm just like, someday.
Yeah.
And like, I appreciate you bringing it up because it's very true, right? Like I should call more, I should do these things more. And I actively do now that I'm a little bit, older. And like, my grandmother's 97, she lives here with us now.
Oh,
and like,
wow.
And so like I see these relationships, right? Like, and I ask her these questions and, at this point she's just ready to go. She's just like, I'm through with this, but it's because she's seen so much in her life and all of the people that she's ever known and cared for are starting to pass away and whatnot. And I'm just like, oh man, like you do get to that point in your life and like you can't get these years back, but in a way I think about, reaching a certain point where I'm like, okay, now I can start to buy my time back a little bit without feeling like I'm not moving ahead in certain areas in my life. I just think that ultimately like the more that I can create for people, the better off I'm going to be. Like, I just think that that's like my life mission is to be able to create an environment for other people to thrive in. And so like the more that I can put out there, the more that I can do for others, the more my life feels full. And so like, it just feels full because of this. Like it's everything that I love, in my life, truly.
I think about that from time to time too, as far as like, if I didn't have the podcast, who would I be?
Yeah.
If I didn't have this EMT training program, who would I be?
Yeah.
Like, who are we without our work?
Yeah, for sure. Who am I without my work? I only think that I'm good at this because of all the other characteristics that I have. Like, I make this joke all the time because I'm like, I'm just clean in general. You know what I mean? And so like that skill transferred over to working in high-end kitchens is just because I'm clean and organized in general. I'm also incredibly loyal. Like that's a very big thing for me, and integrity is really high up there for me as well. And so like they transfer in whatever aspect of life that you want. Like I had a sous chef when I was working at Momotaro, who's a really great friend of mine, Jason Bellevaux. And he said, we were having a conversation one time and he said something to me where he's like, it wouldn't matter if I was a plumber. Like I would just try to be the best plumber that I could be. And so like, to me, I'm like, oh, well, I still have these core values that it doesn't matter to me where I am or what I'm doing. I'm trying to do the right thing by people all the time. So like, the cooking thing is like, that's a personal thing. Like I love food and I love nature. But hospitality is really my passion. I want to bend over backwards to make other people feel good, right? Like that's how I get joy, right? Like I want to give as much as possible. Like when I see somebody being taken care of and, you know, we had something to do with it, like that makes me feel really good. The cooking thing, dude, I'm just a nerd about food. Like the more that I cook, the older that I get, the more that I can just like, you know, if I slice a carrot on a mandolin, you know, and I look at the ring against the light and I just see how perfect nature is, I'm just like, I can do a lot of cool things with food. I could never make this carrot, right? And so like, I really think about that part as like the nerdiness of you know, loving food, right? Like I think about it in this way where it's like, you know, the sun's beaming down in like this perfect kind of condition for food to grow. Plates, you know, tectonic plates are kind of going above and under each other.
All
right?
the different things that had to happen.
All the things that had to happen, right? And like now it's spewing out this like nutrient-rich soil, and this like thing, this carrot, this whatever is growing, and it takes months for it to become this thing, and now it's in your hands. I'm like, just don't fuck it up. But I need like the people that work with me when I like, if there's cooks that are listening to this, and I'm just like, don't fuck that thing up. Yeah. Because like it's so much like, it's so much love and joy and energy that's been put into this thing that's delivered to you, like delivered to somebody else with love. And that's really like my theory around, you know, the food aspect. But, you know, so when I say that, I'm just like, that part is personal to me, but everything else, like it is universal. Yeah. Like it could be transferred.
That's funny. Instead of saying, do not fuck it up, is there like a more, clear way of saying?
Yeah. Treat it with love and respect. Like treat it with love and respect. I mean, like to me, like that's obvious, right? But I guess that's what I mean by it, where I'm just like, don't just.
And it's tough because that can be subjective.
For sure. Yeah. Yeah. And it definitely, you know, has gotten me in trouble in so many ways, right? Like when I was younger, you know, I make this joke all the time of like the biggest heartbreak that I've ever dealt with was finding out that not everyone is like me. And like, you know, when I was younger, I'd be like, why don't you just get it? Right? Like, and I, you know, thought that I worked harder than everyone and that I cared more than everyone. And it wasn't true, right? You just had to figure out how to say things to people. But, you know, so when I say that, it's almost like kind of tongue in cheek of like, don't fuck it up. It's just like, you have to look at this thing and just say, wow, this took so long for me to get this thing in my hands. Like I have to treat it really well. Like I can't burn this thing because then I have to throw it away. And like, what's the point of that at that point?
And so when you guys receive the ingredients for the day, you do that as a team? Do you break it up as a team? And do you even like to, I'm sure you share the backstory of where all these things are coming from.
Yeah, for sure.
It reminds me of like the work that you guys are doing, as well as Jake at Feld. Like that means so much. And then when your team cares, it just shows in the work, and then eventually, hopefully, the consumers care that much more, right? But I wonder how watered down all that backstory and info gets.
You know, vary, but you know, I'm not a thought leader on this, right? Like a lot of the chefs that I admire and look at, I mean, they've been talking about this forever. Okay. I mean, yeah, for sure. Like you can look at a place like the French Laundry, and it's like a lot of the cooks, like when they come there, they start in the garden. Like you don't even get to like really cook with the food. Like you just start kind of learning how these things are cultivated, which for me was kind of very innate. Like I grew up in Albania, like the idea of a frozen food section wasn't even there. Like you can think of maybe like your grandparents or great grandparents, like somebody would just come to their house and drop off a block of ice. Yeah. And that was their refrigerator, you know, wow. And like, but it's real. And that's only like, I don't know, 80, 100 years ago. Like, besides that, like, you know, humanity's been around for 250,000 years. It wasn't until about 10,000 years ago that we stopped being nomadic and started creating, you know, communities to live in, and then, you know, learn how to farm, et cetera. And so, oh my God, where was I going with this? Because I just got so excited.
There's an order and process of things, and there's a ladder to climb, and which when you said that, you know, starting in the garden, made me think of like, I wonder if people are just too quick to jump steps.
Yeah, I mean, for sure. I think you have to like know where it's coming from. I think like that's kind of what I was saying is like, you know, when I was growing up, right, like it was a poor country, and we lived in the capital city, and you know, if you don't live in the capital city, you're either a farmer or a fisherman, and you go to where there's the highest density of population to be able to sell your product. And so we would walk through these markets that are just like bustling with produce that's seasonal, right? Like that's the other part of it, right? It's just like eating things when they're in season. And so I just had this like firsthand experience where I'm just like, this is normal. It wasn't until I came to the US that I'm just like, oh, like there's all these like different frozen food sections and et cetera, right? And just like, and also like the idea of like eating asparagus in whatever season that's not spring or whatever, right? We're just like, oh, like this is just available to me all the time. And people forget about that. And so this is something that I try to like tell our guests and our clients when we're with them, is like trying to explain that story of like where this came from and why it's so important that like, you're eating it at this time, right? And just saying like, we only have this product for a couple of weeks. And this is actually, like, this is the shoot version of it, and then this is the flower version of it, right? Like this is the difference between literally what 3 weeks can do in this environment. Like to us as cooks and chefs, like that's so exciting because you get to watch that, right? Like, but I think for people, like they generally have no clue. I think, I can't speak for everywhere, but I think in the US, like that's kind of, it's definitely a thing where people are removed from what they're eating. I think people are cooking less. I wish people would cook more at home. I wish people took more time to just sit down and have a meal together, for sure.
I think in the setting that you've created in private dining and certain restaurants out here in the city, you have that opportunity because it's such a small number of guests, and you have the time to explain certain things.
It's so intimate. That's the one thing that I think I really enjoy about the private dining aspect. Because, in a traditional restaurant setting, the, back of house is back of house, right? Like you're hidden away from the clients. Like you don't actually hear any of the feedback unless it's, bad, of course. But, like the servers kind of really get like that front interaction with the guests. So it's like, you never actually hear anybody say, wow, this is delicious or et cetera. And so, I make this joke of like, well, we're back of house for a reason because we don't necessarily want to talk to people, which is true. I'm not like, I've had to like learn that skill of kind of orating and public speaking. But it is nice. Like, and I think we've been very fortunate to work with a lot of people that do care about where their food comes from. And, it's not just a meal to them, right? Like they're excited to have this experience. And so they listen and they're curious. And that part is just awesome, man. I got to say. Yeah.
Do you remember the first time that someone more green or new to the industry than you came into your purview? And like, it was probably maybe even before you became a sous chef. And like, what was that like, being able to start imparting your own wisdom in the kitchen? Yeah,
I think I actually really enjoyed it. Like, I think by the time that I did become a sous chef, my favorite part was being able to teach other people. I love being able to lay the groundwork of what it takes to kind of be successful. And like, it's, again, like these are all things that were taught to me and people have been doing them for a long time. Like I think of things as in terms of like, when somebody comes to work a new station, it's like you should learn to work it the way that somebody showed you it. And then if you find that there's ways that you can do it better after you've learned it that way, then you can, implement your own ways too. But I think it's great, especially in terms of like giving confidence to people.
Yeah.
Right. Because there's people that might be doing something and they're like, God, I'm so stupid. Like, I'm just not good at this thing. And I'm just like, dude, like give it time. Like you need reps,
Yeah.
And just being able to support them through that. Like they need to know that.
Do you sometimes feel like you're the good cop to the executive chef bad cop?
No, not at all.
Okay.
I don't, dude, honestly, like it took a very long time for me to get to a point where I was doing that sort of thing. Like I just, like I said, when I was younger, like I was not like that. I was not very nice to people. I really was not. And, regrettably in a way, but
I think we were all that maybe egotistic back in like when we were in your early 20s and you feel like you're learning faster than everyone else and you feel like you're on this hill.
Or that you care more. That's all that it is.
Or that you care more.
And, the way that I look at things is I'm like, if people are messing something up, it's either because A, they don't know better, which is fine because you can be taught, or you're ignorant, like you're ignorant, like you don't know better, or you don't care.
Yeah, willful ignorance.
And so like that part I can't help you with. So like I always like felt that I was just like, I just personally, honestly, I think people are brilliant and I think people are very smart and I think people know exactly what they're doing and I think people decide to make choices that are not aligned with their best interest. And I honestly believe that, right? And like, I've had moments where I was like that. And like, I remember a very specific moment in like very early in my career where we were so busy and I put up something that I was not 100% happy with. And remember being called out about it, and just like the amount of shame that I felt in that moment. Like I literally just like didn't sleep for like 3 days, like because I just felt like I let everybody down, right? And it was just it was this pinnacle moment of like, I will never do that again, you know, because like, you know, if I'm gonna say these things, I have to actually do them. I can't just like be so hard on everybody else, and all of a sudden like no, I have to uphold myself to the same standard, right? Like I can't hold other people to the fire and not hold myself to the fire. So, you know, in terms of like teaching other people, like I think
going back to that example, how'd you reconcile? Was it just time? You said 3 days. Like what happened for you to come to terms?
I mean, I think I just accepted that was something that I did, and then I would never do it again, right? Like, and I hadn't, and so like that moment kind of like it's maybe that's trauma because I don't really know what it looks like, but like
it left that much of an impression.
Yeah, it left that much of an impression, right? Where I'm just like, it clicks, right? Like, and now every time it's just like you could choose to you know, not pick up that thing on the floor when you see it, right? Or you could just be like, just do the right thing, right? And I'd much rather just, you know, get yelled at and say, Chef, I fucked up. I need to start over. I need another 5 minutes than have to go through that again. Because like, you know, it takes so much time to build trust and it could just be gone like this.
It's hard to rebuild trust.
Yeah, it's very, so, I mean, that's probably one of the things that like, if somebody were like, oh, like, do you regret anything in life? I'm like, that moment like stands out so much. So kind of like, you know, being able to like build cooks to kind of have the confidence to say it too, like that's a big part of it too, man. Like, but our industry, especially like the places that I was at, like just did not allow.
What's so cutthroat?
It is, yeah. and it matters, right? Because everybody's on a, you know, all these dishes are waiting for you. They're coming from other stations, and you're all communicating together. They're going to one table, but it's coming from different stations. Like they all have to come together, right? So like everybody has to be on point, and like again, like the team has to win together. It's tough.
Have you cultivated an ability to identify individuals that want it just as much as you do, or want it enough to where they are almost worthy of your time?
Again, I think everybody,
you know, like a lot of these things can't be taught; they have to be learned.
Yeah, you just have to have the willingness to learn it, right? But it really just comes down to the thing that I was mentioning earlier about like being honest with yourself about the things that you want about it. Like, I think it's just very obvious to me when people want to be there or they don't want to be there, right? Like, it's just super obvious. Like, if for whatever reason I get a feeling that you're just like trying to get out of there early or you don't want to do the thing, and I'm just like, we're here, like you can go. Like, nobody is holding you here. We want to be here. The rest of us want to be here. Like I'm like, I can't even be in the same room as you. I know it sounds insane, but I'm like, I can't, where I'm like, if you don't want to be, like, you're a human being, like you're so amazing and you're capable of so many great things. Like, don't hold yourself down. Just go. Like, go somewhere where you feel like I'm meant to be here, and like go do the things that you want to be doing. Yeah. Because if this isn't it, like, that's fine. Like, but be honest. Like, just say, you know what, I don't want to do this. Like, I thought that I did, and I came to the conclusion that I don't.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Anything more to say about your time at Japonais?
No. If any of these folks are listening to it, they've been an incredible. Man, they were great friends. I still talk to a lot of them to this day.
That's amazing. What came next?
So the same chef that was at Japonais that ended up becoming my roommate as well, he accepted a job offer to go work at a new Japanese restaurant in town, and asked me if I wanted to go with him. That place was Momotaro.
Nice.
And that was in 2014, and like late 2014. And so again, just that was the next place that I went to.
And what was your role when you moved over to Momotaro?
I was still a cook.
Okay.
Just started on the walk station. I mean, like, we were just like prepping downstairs. Like, the place was still being built. People were still, like, it was still training. And there was nothing in the West Loop or whatever Fulton Market is now. I mean, it was booming now. Nothing there, dude. Like, I mean, it was this place. Like, we used to go on the rooftop and be able to see crazy skylines and whatnot. And like, it is gone now. But I think I've really kind of hit a stride there in terms of learning about flavor profiles. Because another thing is, you know, like, being from Albania, and like my parents or my mom cooking all the time, is like we just ate at home a lot. So like my idea of other cultures and other food like was kind of minimal.
Okay.
So like going to Asian cuisine or Japanese restaurants for the first time, I mean, I remember eating something at Japanese that was like an ahi tuna tartare that had like edamame and like pearl onions and like a vinaigrette that was like soy, yuzu, and olive oil. And I was like fucking mind blown, dude. I was like, I'd never had, I mean, to this day, like it's delicious, right? Like who wouldn't love to just crush that? But I just, I was in this world of trying these new flavors and these techniques that I was just like mesmerized by. And definitely really got into Japanese cuisine because obviously the simplicity of, I wouldn't say necessarily simplicity, but just like in terms of like presentation and the idea of, just trying to showcase a product as opposed to, putting a bunch of different things on a plate and making it look beautiful, but not necessarily having one thing be really standoutish, right? Like this, coming across the concept of like a sushi chef only making rice for the first, 4 or 5 years, you're like, that's crazy. Like I could be working all these stations and under this time and learning all these different techniques, but it's like, is it about that? Or is it about being able to just hone in on your craft and be really good at this thing? So I really got an awesome experience of working there. And again, like I was in an environment with a bunch of people that were just way better than me. Like if I look back at all the restaurants that I worked at, I'm like, there were just people around me that were just way better than me. Yeah. And that it's just so important. It really is. You have to put yourself in a position where
to your personal growth.
Yeah. Like it's just new ideas, and it's like you don't even know it at the time, right? Like you might even be looking at it as like, dang, this guy's just being hard on me.
And as when you eventually become executive chef, and you're at the top of your own place, like how do you foster that continued growth?
Well, I read all the time. I'm constantly hungry to just learn more. I mean, I think at this point I'm really trying to dial it back in terms of putting out as kind of as simple as food as possible and just sourcing the best stuff as possible. Yeah. But the continuation is always there. The way that I think about it is kind of like the executive chef is really in charge of like business operations and like marketing and sales and filling up seats. The chef de cuisine is really the one kind of leading the the food production.
Are they still on the line, or they have the ability to fill in any gaps?
Yeah, like that sort of thing. I would say like, like at all the places that I worked at, like let's say Roister, when I was there, like Brochu was, he worked the 5 days that he was working that were open, and he was on a pass. Like he would still come in early and prep with the prep team, and it's not like he's doing every single project, but he had his list of things that he was doing. And besides that, he was on the pass and he was there every day. But you're still in meetings with the other chefs or investors or whatever, right? Like you still have to run the operation. And so, where my personal journey is now, where I'm, quote unquote, the executive chef, it's like, there's tons of business stuff that I need to be learning, right? Like, I think nobody thinks of that, right? No. Like the chefs or the cooks, like nobody's thinking about, dude, how do I get people through the door? You just know that people are there, right? And obviously, thankfully, I never worked at a place that was slow, and it seemed to always be busy. But like, even especially with what I'm doing now and people that are reaching out, like a very common question that I get a lot is like, dude, how do you get clients? Because it's real. You're like, dude, like it's cool to think about all the food stuff, but it's like, how do you get people to pay for it? So there's always something to learn, right? Like you're a business owner.
Has it been a newfound interest as you get further removed from the actual kitchen?
The business stuff? Yeah, dude, that's why I think the Hormozy stuff is amazing, right? Where I'm just like, and I obsess about it for sure, because I mean, it's ultimately systems and operations, and it has to be like replicatable. And I've definitely found a new love for it. And in a way, I'm kind of good at this stuff. That's the thing. I'm like, I could be a lot better at it, but it's something to yearn towards. Like you have to have something that you're trying to get better at. Yeah. Otherwise it's like, if you know everything, like there's, what's the point of tomorrow, right? Like it's kind of how I think about it. Like, if you knew that you were going to live forever, there'd be no urgency.
I thought about that too.
You know what I mean? Like there'd be no urgency in trying to
What's
get
the
anything
point?
done. Like what's the point of telling anybody that you love them? Like there's always tomorrow. And so no, that part makes it for sure. As you get older, it definitely like you become more aware of the fact that like, you know, you could die any day, but B is just like, dude, this thing is not going to be forever, right? And like, for whatever reason, the number 100 is in like all of our heads, and like you think you're going to live to like 100, but like the average lifespan for men is like whatever 75 or something, right? Like, you know, I'm in a couple of years I'll be 35. I'm like, that's halfway.
Yeah,
you know what I mean? And like hopefully it gets, you know, technology and medicine gets better and you live longer and longer, and I would love to live longer because there's a lot of things that I want to do with my life, but like it gets real. You're like, dude, I need to actually hunker down here and like think about my steps, right? Especially because life has changed so much, like after COVID. You know, as far as I was concerned, I was just going to work in restaurants forever. Like when I was really young, I was like, oh, I want to be a 3-star chef and be at the pass when I'm 50 and blah blah. And like and it's a very beautiful, amazing, romantic idea. But I'm just at a different place in my life now, and I've had to adjust and come to terms with the fact that the world is just different. So
yeah, the pandemic was a curse and a blessing to many. For
sure. It probably ended up being a blessing to me, but
yeah.
I don't know.
Did you ever get to work with sushi?
No, not really. I mean, that's
or there's no desire to work with sushi?
No, I mean, I think sushi is awesome. No, not really. I was always on the hot side of things. But I remember at Japonais, especially at Japonais by Morimoto, they ended up building an omakase in like the front of the dining room, but it was an omakase that was like the sushi omakase, and then right behind it was like a hotline omakase. And they would just be feeding us snacks all the time, like all the trim with like rice and nori sheets and just smashing all day. And so like delicious. But I never really had a huge interest for it, to be honest with you.
I gotcha.
Yeah.
When did you feel like, what were you doing at the time when you felt ready to move on from Momotaro?
You know, I had worked all the stations. I had done prep and, you know, learned to do the butchery, you know, the fish and all the robata stuff. And I knew that they had a very solid team. Like all the people that were there basically stayed on the entire time, which is really awesome. Wow. And so I was like, okay, like I'm at a point where this is not gonna, you know, I'm not gonna move forward here. And maybe it was the right or wrong thing to do. Ultimately, it ended up being the very right thing to do. But a good friend of mine named David Baker and Georgia Baker, who are married, both worked at Momotaro, but they were only at Momotaro because they were at Graham Elliott previously working with Andrew Brochu, who ended up being the chef of Roister. And they were there kind of like in this like limbo until Roister was being built out, and kind of like as it was getting really close to opening, they were basically like, hey, like, do you want to come work here? I went there and I met with him, and I was like, yeah, like I always wanted to work for the Alinea Group, right? Like I read Life on the Line when I was like 18. I was like, I want to do this for sure. And then, you know, wanted to work at Alinea at some point, but just never.
You never thought to stage or ask if
no,
you
I
can...
staged. I mean, like, and I'd asked.
Okay.
And I'd asked. The answer was no.
Really? It was that competitive. It was.
Yeah. I mean, you know, I couldn't tell you what was going through his mind, right? But I, you know, and I say this humbly, but I'm like, I was an asset in a way of like, you know, I was somebody that you could at least rely on, that like would show up every day, and you didn't have to worry about whether my station was going to be set up. That helps. Like for me, I'm like, cool. Thank God if I had, you know, cooks like that in my restaurant, I'd be like, that's an asset. So, you know, I don't know what was going on through his head in terms of that, but I had asked of saying like, hey, you know, maybe I want to go here, and, you know, I got to stage and et cetera, and it would have been fine. But I think ultimately, like, I just had the best time of my entire like culinary career was at Roister. Just like by and large, like it just, I made incredible friendships, and just learned so much about both cooking, but also just myself. I mean, and the act of perseverance. I mean, it was the first time in my life where it went from being like, oh, I want to be a chef, to being like, I want to be a sous chef by this time, and I want to have these skills and et cetera, right? So it was like, it went from this like kind of
personal
nebulous
deadlines, yeah.
It went from like it kind of being a nebulous thing to being like, I'm doing this thing. And it was, you know, it wasn't easy, but
Did
like,
that was that self-imposed, or did you meet other people at Roister that also put their own deadlines on themselves?
No, I think it was self-imposed, but like to your point of like, I'm fairly observant.
Yeah.
Like, I would just look at what the successful people around me were doing, right? I'm like, I would look at Bertrand, I'm like, this guy's got a yellow notepad and he writes things down and he's organized and blah blah. And like, I started looking at things like that where I'm like, oh, okay, the people that I really respect and are good at what they do these things, and I just started to pick up those things. And so it just became this idea where I'm like, okay, like I could actually do this. Like I could actually take this somewhere. I think I just like crossed this threshold of being like, I'm just somebody that can complete any task to like, okay, I can actually shape my own thing eventually down the line. And like,
started to feel control.
Yeah. I started to actually like feel control of my actions, where I was just like, oh, cool. Like I'm completing my own station, and now I'm like reaching out to other people, trying to help them out, and like like it was like a natural progression that I was going to get to another level at my career.
What was the average amount of time you noticed people would spend at Roister?
The cooks?
Yeah.
The interesting thing about Roister was, like as opposed to Japonais or Momotaro was, at Japonais I can go in whenever I wanted to. And I would just get there like, I don't know, some days like 8 a.m., right? Just be there till 1, like just because I could. And I could just like learn, I could just do prep and then clock in and then do my station. Same thing with Momotaro, I would just show up. I could do prep and, with a prep team in the morning and learn a different skill set and then clock in. And then at Roister, it was like everybody comes in at 2. Like, it was like, the AM team comes in and they have to leave by 2:30. Everybody from the PM team comes in at 2. And there's like a little bit of overlap between the teams where you get to communicate with the people that actually were like prepping certain aspects of your station. Yeah.
Why isn't all restaurants like that? Why aren't all restaurants
Why are they not all like that? I'm sure that they are more nowadays.
Oh, okay.
But I think the free labor thing. And
I was like, when you're saying that, I'm like, free labor? Like, what is this?
Oh, dude, our industry is fucking
notorious for that.
Notorious for free labor. And so, yeah, like that was another thing where it was just like, now all of a sudden you were just like, everything has a time frame, right? I'm just like, I have this prep list. Like now I'm like putting a timer and saying, I'm doing this in 15 minutes, right? Like I'm doing this task in 15 minutes and I'm moving on to this and this and this. And all of a sudden, like you're multitasking, if there's such thing, like, it's really task switching. But like your multitasking just becomes a lot better. You're just like, and then you're a machine.
Streamlined. Yeah.
At some point, like you are a machine. Like you're like, I have 5 projects going. I know how long it's going to take for all of them. And that's why it's so important to like not jump stations all that much. Like you should do a station for 6 months so it like the back of your hand, right? Like just do the same monotonous thing over and over and over and over and over again. And so that was very rewarding, honestly, like kind of, and it was just cool because like the camaraderie behind it too, where it's like we would all meet at the same place and have our friggin' cigarettes and coffee and energy drinks or whatever at the time. And then we would all walk in at the same time, like sprint downstairs and all get changed and all like, get ready for our stations. Yeah, I feel like I really just built an awesome friendship with all the people that I was working with. And that was another restaurant where like damn near everybody that like I worked with from day one, because I was part of the opening team until I left, like almost everybody was there from the beginning. Like I worked with almost all those people for like 4 years.
Wow.
Which is, it's cool. Like I feel like, I don't know. I don't have the experience of working in other places where that didn't happen, but. And
at that time, how often would you see Chef Grant?
Grant was there quite a lot in the beginning. I mean, he'd be there all the time, right? Because, Next is next door and so is the aviary. So he's always kind of around. But I think I was very fortunate because when we first opened, he had a dish that was on my station. And so for like the first month of training, it was just me and him on a station.
Wow.
Which was really cool. I feel like I learned a lot from just kind of even being around him, not necessarily asking a lot of questions, but it was, I think the thing that I learned most, and this is really like a conclusion that I came to by myself, but like, for the people that are listening, I think people can look at somebody like Grant and say, wow, like this person is so creative and thinks so much outside of the box. And like, he has this like X factor, right? And I think the thing that I realized more than anything is that like maybe that's true, right? Maybe certain aspects of that is true. Like maybe he does have something that nobody else has. But the one thing I know for sure about that guy is that he's a fucking beast. Like he will cook anybody under the table. Like he can jump on anybody's station and work it better than you. Like he's just a phenomenal cook. Like outside of like the chef aspect of it, like he's just a phenomenal cook. Like he can just do everything really, really, really well. And he's present. He's there all the time, right? Like even when, you know, Brochu left and we were like reopening the restaurant as a kind of a new concept with a new menu, the guy would be there like 8 a.m. in the morning and he'd be there until like 2 at night with us. Like he'd be texting us at, you know, 3 in the morning about different ideas, or just like come to the kitchen with like bags of food. And he had just been to like Chinatown, like dropping things off, like just obsessive, right? But the point that I'm trying to make with that is that like you have to put in the work. And like I thought that to myself, where I'm just like, this is not unattainable. Like this guy just put in the work. And like I respect and admire that aspect of him a lot, where I'm like, he's just about it, right?
Yeah. How long did it take for you to, if ever he was on a pedestal, but remove Chef Grant from a pedestal, or at least feel comfortable enough to just casually have a conversation? Because if you're working, there's this amount of pressure where you don't feel like this is the right time to ask certain questions.
Yeah, you know what? I think I like made it a point that I would do it like pretty much right away.
Oh,
I think like only because like I think everybody's like terrified of chef. Right? It's like when chef comes around, like nobody talks. Everybody's got their head down. Like you go up to him and say, "Hello, chef." Like you acknowledge that he's there. But you don't have these like sort of conversations. And like I think that I just would. I think I would just ask him questions sometimes, and he wants that. He wants to interact. Like the guy is a cook. You know what I'm saying? Like he loves hanging out with other cooks and other chefs, and being in that environment and like engaging, right? Like so if you also really care in that sense, like he'll engage back with you. So I have a tremendous amount of respect for, you know, him in general, right? Like if I look at, shoot, I mean, you know, having a 3-star Michelin restaurant for 20 years, dude, like, and I don't even know how many seats Alinea has, but I don't know, maybe 100, like they just have so many seats, like, and to do that kind of food for 20 years, consistently for 20, I'm like, it is not an easy feat. Like most 3 stars that I've been to, like have like 20 seats, 30, 40, right? Like,
was there ever a point where you felt like, why should we hold the Michelin guide to this regard?
Yeah, I mean, personally, I personally don't care. You know what I mean? Like, I'm not like why
are they the standard, you know?
Why are they the standard? It's a good question. I mean, I don't know if you know anything about their backstory, but it's
the tire company.
The tire company. Yeah. I mean, like the guide was made as a promotional piece to say, hey, you should drive to this place, right? And then it all of a sudden became this thing where it's like everybody is like, oh, this is a place to go, right? And I mean, there's so many other kind of
accolades,
that you can get along the way, and it's changed a lot. You know, like I was fortunate to go to Paris and other countries in Europe where, you know, I ate at 2- and 3-star Michelin restaurants, and like, and even 1-star Michelin restaurants, and like, I got to tell you, I'm like, a 1-star in Europe is really not the same thing as some 1-stars in the U.S., and it's fine. Like it's fine. I'm not like, it is this thing where like people regard it as that, and like, you know, if you see it like on my website or my page or whatever, like I have a training of working at a Michelin star restaurant. I do think that at some point it held a lot of regard, and it still does. But like, you know, in my own personal life, I think it held a lot of regard because it just, you know, like you knew that it had to kind of pass a certain standard for it to even be considered. I think I would be fine if I never got one in my life. I'm not like dying for it. And obviously the whole quote unquote either supper club or private dining thing or whatever you want to call it, like they don't register. I mean, it's like,
oh, okay,
not at all. Like they're like, this is too inconsistent. We have no idea where you're going to be.
I see.
Or what menu you're serving. So I am not worried about Michelin reaching me at all. I want to build a sustainable business. Like,
you got other things to worry about.
I am more into the Alex Hormozi stuff right now, where I'm like, if I'm going to sell this thing, I'm like, I want it to be replicatable. Like, that's more of a feat to me than it is, you know, getting somebody to recognize me for, you know, having outstanding food and service based on just like one person.
Sure. The team, did they give you opportunities to experience their own restaurant? At like
go-
Roister
to
or
go-
Next or
for sure.
Alinea?
Yeah. You can go at any of them, and I ate at all the restaurants that I worked at for sure. Yeah, I mean, you would even get a discount at places that you went to.
Did it meet expectations?
Yeah, for sure.
Oh.
I think Roister, like, I will say this confidently, like, when we were open, that first year that it opened, I mean, we got a star right away. We got a ton of accolades right away. I honestly believe it was one of the best restaurants in the U.S., period. Andrew Brochu, for anybody that either knows him or knows of his kind of personal thing, is just like a phenomenal chef in general, just makes amazing food. And if I got anything out of Roister, it would be systems and operations. Like, that's what that guy is. And I'm just like, he just knows how to make awesome food that can come out quickly and efficiently and can be the same every time. And there's not too much variance on who's cooking it or whatnot, because the systems are dialed in without making it, McDonald's, right? Like,
that's so interesting. So everyone has an impact, but these systems are so dialed in that there's really no room for individual creativity, but that individual acknowledges that this role that they play is for the collective.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, there's
different ways to reach fulfillment, right?
There's definitely, but like, everything is still, we're still sourcing from really awesome places, right? Like, in the traditional brigade system, where it'd be like, there's no really AM or PM team. It would just be like one person is responsible for this one station, and so they're doing all the prep for it 5 days a week or 6 days a week, right? Like, that was the traditional system. It'd be one person for one station, and then at some restaurants maybe they still do that, but I think it's kind of crazy, right? Like, I mean, it takes a lot of hours. And then
I see the upside, right? The appreciation of everything, of your station.
It's the most amazing thing ever.
Like, you are solely responsible for this, like, the success of the station, right?
Yeah. And like, I was at Smyth for a little bit after leaving, Roister, and like, that was probably the closest thing to that kind of system, because there was no really AM team. There was, the sous chefs that showed up before everybody, and they started certain projects and got things going for your quote unquote station, but outside of that, like, you were pretty much responsible for everything, right? And like, you place your own orders, right? Like, at Roister, there was a sous chef, and he could ask you stuff and say, hey, like, will you need more of this stuff or whatever, because you would know, because you're on that station. But like, one person places the order, as opposed to like the traditional brigade system, which was like, you have to go up to the chef and say, these are the things that I need, and if you didn't, for whatever, order celery that day, like, that's on you. You got to figure that out. Like, you have to go to the store on your own time. And but it's good. It's good accountability, right? Like, that's the thing where it's just like, when you dial in, dude, it feels so good. Like, and that's why I say, like, you have to know what you're about and what you want to be doing. Like, for me, I'm like, that's a dream, right? Because like, having the AM team, like, it might be somebody that's still doing all the same projects for the saute station, right? Like, you could set it up that way. And they might work it for a couple of months too, and you have a relationship with your, either commis or your AM person or et cetera. And they might not make something as great, but it's just like, at that point, like, what are you going to do, right? Like, you might get a product and they're gone for the day, and you have to start it over. So there's good and bad parts to it, but I think, Momotaro was kind of like that same system too, and so was Roister, where it's like the AM team, driven by sous chefs that were there all the time, were so good and so dialed in that like the cooks would have to come in and kind of grab things from the cooler to like set their stations up, but really, like, a lot of the things that you would learn would be in prep. And so like, every cook wants to be on hearth or wants to be on grill or whatever the hardest station is, because it's kind of this like inflating ego thing. But like, if you're going to come to learn a lot of like the things that you need to be learning about the dishes, like, prep is really where it's at. And I learned that later on, but they both had really good systems like that, where it's just like, it was just like checks and balances. Like, you just had somebody that was checking the food all along the way, so that by the time that it got to the line, things were finished there, but like the hard work and the prep, everything was, cooked beforehand. Everything was in a deli, weighed out. So like, your costs, right? You can't just guess whether something is going to be profitable or not. Like, so learned a lot from that for sure.
Wow.
Yeah.
What year was it when you then left Roister? Where are we in the timeline?
God, this point is so blurry to me.
And then you said you went to Smyth.
We opened in 2016. I feel like actual opening.
You said 4 years? So 2020 then?
Oh, like right beforehand, right?
Because pre-pandemic.
Yeah. So like right around there. Yeah, it's kind of a little bit blurry because
2019ish.
Yeah, it's a little bit blurry because so we opened basically Berkshire stayed like 3.5 years, and then I was gonna leave around that same time as well. Grant asked me to stay until they kind of flipped the menu and stuff, so I stayed a little bit longer.
There's that loyalty.
I mean, it's the right thing to do for me, right? I'm like, yeah, for sure, it's the right thing to do. I can't just like jump ship, right? Like these are, again, people that I've worked with for 3.5 years. Like that's a big chunk of my life when I look at it from that perspective, right? Like, and so, yeah, I stayed there for that time. And then I had always wanted to stage at Smyth and just never kind of got the opportunity.
Did they have 2 stars at the time?
They had 2 stars at the time.
Okay.
And I was supposed to be there for like a week or 2. Like, I think I showed up and one of their team members like had, a family member pass, and they had to go back to like Korea, I think. And then all of a sudden, like, they couldn't make it back. And all of a sudden they're like,
there's
well,
an
actually,
opening.
yeah, well, they were like, we're going to need you to stay a little bit longer. But at that point in my life, I was like, I was looking to move to another state. Like, I wanted to go work at a 3-star in another state. So like, that's kind of like the conversation that I had with Brusher, was saying, hey, like, I'm actually going to leave Roister, which is funny because the day that I told him that I was looking to leave was the same day that he came to me and was like, actually, I'm going to be leaving, which is funny how that happened. So, but I was dead set on the fact that I was like, oh, I'm just here to stage for a little bit. And they were like, could you just stay with us for a little bit until we find a replacement and just hang out on the station? So I don't know, man. I can't even remember how long it was. It was probably 2.5, almost 3 months that I ended up staying.
Okay.
Which was great. Like, I still have friends from there that are really awesome, and it's just an incredible restaurant too.
Did you notice any differences between the two, Roister and Smyth? Culture-wise, obviously, food-wise, but like just the vibe or the flows or the systems.
For sure. I mean, like the systems thing, right? Like, one of the funniest things that I would notice would be like, like John comes in before everybody and just like goes through people's coolers, and just like sometimes you'd be like looking at your prep, you're like, I thought I had this thing, but it's just like not there. Like, if I tossed it or something, and so like whatever your prep list was, you got to add this thing to it. Not a ton. Like, I think in a way, I think Berkshire kind of like detests the whole like 3-star kind of thing, and has kind of gone like the opposite way with what he's doing in Savannah. But still has that level of standard. And so like the things that we were doing at Roister, while it seemed like a very casual restaurant, like it was very much not a casual environment to be in.
Okay.
I would definitely say like culture-wise, it was probably the hardest place I had to work at out of all the places. Yeah.
That's amazing. That's wild that Smyth is more casual than Roister.
I never, again, maybe I wasn't there long enough, but again, like, it comes down to this thing where it's like the people that are there want to be there. And so like that really matters. It's just like you don't really have to tell people to do their work. Like, everybody wants to be there. So it's not like this crazy thing. Like, yeah, sometimes people mess up, but I never personally heard, John go off on somebody or whatever. I think maybe like my first day, like somebody messed something up. And like, I remember this very specific, I remember like this specific interaction happening on my first day there, because it really goes down to the thing that I said earlier about, I'm like, don't fuck it up. Like, I just remember somebody was like the asparagus got overcooked or something, and he's just looking at it, he's like, what the fuck, man? Like look at this thing, like, it's over. He's like, what's the point even? Like, why are we even doing this? Right? And it really resonates. But like, when you're the cook and you're having that conversation and you love cooking just as much as this guy does, like, you feel that disappointment, because it's just like, I didn't mean to fuck it up, but I did. And so like, but it's a good lesson to have, and it's a good like kind of dichotomy for somebody to just like be honest with you and say, hey, like, this, we kind of like, we messed this up, and like, it reflects all of us.
Is there ever a talk about like trying not to take it personally, or do you go the other way and take it personally, so personal that you never make that mistake again?
I mean, I think you shouldn't take it personally. I think it's a lesson that I learned really late. I think I definitely took things really personally. I remember Dave, who was one of the sous chefs that I worked with at Momotaro and then Roister. I remember him telling me one time, like, service is gonna end. Like, you're gonna, like, you mess this thing up. Yes, sure, you mess this thing up at the beginning of service, but like at the end of the day, like service is gonna end. You got a new fresh start tomorrow. So like just don't let it freaking linger for 3 days. And if anything, like kind of move on pretty quickly from it, especially if you didn't mean to mess it up. Like it'll happen. Sometimes you get really busy, you forgot to think or whatever it is, right? Like it is hard. Like cooking is really hard when you're doing a lot of covers. It's not like I just chose to mess this up. Sometimes you just, whatever. I don't know. Maybe I'm like, I think I always took it personally, and it took me very long to do it. But like, I don't like again, like I'm not into the belittling part of it at all. So as long as somebody's not doing that, I'm just like,
man, disappointment always hurts.
Yeah,
right?
Of course,
especially from someone that you look up to.
Exactly. Yeah, that part does. And so like, to me it shows that you care, right? Like if you were just like, fuck it, like I fucked up and I don't care, like true. That's, you know, I guess they're on the opposite ends there. But I would just say like don't let it mess up the rest of your day. Yeah.
So you were there for 2 to 3 months. Where are we, like, and then did you still have plans to move out of state, or how close are we to the pandemic, all that stuff?
Yeah. So this is, I ended up taking a couple of months off and just traveled. My mom was working for United. At the time, so I would just like, even while I was at Roister, I would literally just go somewhere for like 32 hours. Okay. And just go eat at a restaurant and come back. And so, you know, I just got to fly around for a little bit and go stage at places. I reached out to Grant and I said, you know, I want to go work at, I want to go to Napa. Like I was thinking about, I wanted to go work at the restaurant at Meadowood. I really liked the place. And so, you know, like I'm chatting with him about, you know, like where I should stage and stuff like that. And he's like, you know, if you go to Napa, like it's a very solitary life. Like you're, you know, everything closes early and like you're, you know, et cetera. So he set up a couple of stages for me out in San Francisco and in like Napa. And so like I went and I staged at these places and ultimately ended up getting a position at the restaurant at Meadowood. But then, you know, the pandemic happened and they reached out and they were like, you know, we're putting this on halt. And then I think pretty shortly after that, like the place burned down. There's like a wildfire and it burned down. And I think they've rebuilt it since. But if I remember correctly, like that's kind of what happened. So it kind of like threw my world for a loop, right? And now all of a sudden, like we're in the middle of COVID. Yeah. And I'm hanging around my house. Like we're all thinking life's gonna go back to normal. You know, and I'm there, but I'm used to working 100-hour weeks. Like I like working, right? And so like I started just cooking meals out of my house just to stay busy in the meantime. And was just posting that on Instagram and like telling people like, hey, I'm going to be serving this week and you have 2 days to place your order in. And then on Friday or Saturday, like I'll drop off, etc. And like I did it. And like, I think, you know, either like week 1 or 2, I got like 60 orders, which is crazy.
So did you already at this point develop some level of social media presence then, or is this just still friends and family?
It was like friends and family. I mean, there was probably, I don't even know. I don't think that I care at all. Like at that point I was like, I don't even know, maybe 2,000, 3,000 followers, like very, very low compared to now. Right. But you know, the difference is like the algorithm now, it's like spews you into the whole world. Then it was like, you know, people that you actually knew. Yeah. So, and people are being supportive, right? Because it's the pandemic and they're supporting local people, which was cool. But you know, I'm just like, I'm doing it out of my house. I'm going to Restaurant Depot. I'm getting all these stuff. And like, I tore my house up. I totally messed it up. But I'm doing it and I'm like, all right, well, I'm like, shoot, like I'm making more money than I was working in a restaurant. I was like, this is kind of crazy. And then a friend of mine, Steve, who runs Regalis. I don't know if you're familiar with them. They're a fine food purveyor here in the city. Okay. He reached out and he's like, hey, do you want to do a private event for this person? Like this person just reached out to you. And I was like, all right, cool. And they were in the tri-state area. Like they were, whatever that is, like north of us, and like right by the Wisconsin border and stuff. Okay. And so I did a private event for this guy. And I mean, I can't remember how many people it was. It was probably maybe 10 people or something. Oh. And I drove like 3 hours with all this like prepped food and like, I think I charged him like $1,500 or something. And at that time I was like, holy shit, I just made $1,500 in one day. Like, this is crazy. And so like, I was like, I just made in one day what I would otherwise make in a week doing all this meal stuff. And so the business model kind of changed very quickly.
Okay. Because I was going to ask originally if you were contemplating a meal service plan, but it sounded like the private dining kind of fell into your lap.
Yeah, it kind of fell into my lap from that. Okay. And then it just kept coming, like in random ways. Like in random ways, people would reach out.
Is this through word of mouth?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah,
so like
literally.
people find out, like that's the thing. It's like during the pandemic, people miss shared meals, right? And if there are ways to do it, hence private dining,
And so I just started doing it, a little bit more and more. And I don't know, for that first, like probably 8 months, I don't even know how many I did. 15, maybe like 20 at most. And like I went to like Goodwill and bought some plates that didn't match, and like was doing family meal stuff, and I would or family style meals, and it would just be me. Like I would show up doing like an ATOP, like flipping silverware, flipping all the stuff, like doing all the cleaning by myself,
front of house,
like
back of house,
crazy, right? Like when I look at it now, I'm like, dude, I would never do that again. But that's what it took, and I kept saving that money, and then I remember having. I remember going to a show, Rush's wife, while they were still living in Chicago. She's a musician, so went to their show. Simon was there, Davies, which obviously knew him through Alinea. He was doing something similar. He was building out a kitchen, and so I was just like, well, hey, like I'm like I'll kind of go in on some of it for it, and not like he made all the investments in terms of like building out his own kitchen. Like he had a much more concrete plan of how it was actually going to go down for him.
Is it like a kitchen just to cook in, or is there going to be like a dining option?
No, just like a kitchen to cook in. Like, and so he was super supportive during that part of it. Like, obviously, he made the biggest investment and got all the equipment and stuff like that. And I was, initially just kind of giving him hands with his operation while also doing my thing on the side. And
very cool.
And at some point, I just kept saving my money outside of the, like literally everything. Like I'm like, I paid rent.
Yeah.
and I paid rent at both places, and like, that was it. Right. And then I saved this money, and at a certain point I was like, okay, like I need to kind of get my own thing. Like we're it's getting to be too much to have two people in this thing. And so, I kind of just made the financial commitment on my end. I went to another place. So shout out to him for being super supportive during that time. And, yeah, man. And then I built out my own kitchen a year and some change ago, and bought all the. It was like all the money that I had at the time, put it all into this thing. Got dealt with the city and city of Chicago, not as supportive. But yeah, so kind of got all the certifications and et cetera, and started doing my own thing. But and like along the way, if anybody is like looking to do this sort of thing, like all I did was flip. Like I got some money, and then I bought this thing. Like I got plates, and then I got silverware, and then I got glassware, and then I got somebody to do my website, and then I got somebody to do the workflow, and then you know what I mean. So like and then I was like, okay, like I'm gonna get a server, and I'm gonna stop doing all these things. And in terms of like the Hormozy stuff, where it's just like there's a difference between being an owner and being an operator, and I'm still very much an operator. Like don't let that fool you at all. But yeah, basically just kind of flipped, and that's kind of how I've gotten here. And I would say we do no outreach, which is insane to me. We do like 3 to 5 events a week. Okay. And this is like really in like the busier times. There's times like January where it's slower, but we're really constantly coming up with like different ways to be able to kind of bring more business in during these times, because obviously we have people on the staff and whatnot that have to that you got to pay for it. And like now you're like feel responsible for people. Like that's like the other part when you were like asking about what it's like to be like the executive chef. I'm like, God, like we think about the business, like we think about that aspect of it while also having to do everything else. Like that's the life of the entrepreneur. Like in the beginning it's like you're doing everything. But yeah, that's where we're at now. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. Yeah, it's crazy. I'm like, I just like live the life of a vagabond or a bandit. I don't even know what the word is, but I'm just like roaming around the earth, and like, and I feel super free, like in the sense of just being able to do whatever I want. It's kind of crazy.
Do you have a lot of repeat clients?
Yeah, for sure. There's maybe like 8 or 10. Like they're all repeat within the year.
Yeah.
Like a lot of them do something at least one time within the year, but then there's people that do stuff 3 times a month, 4 times a month.
Oh, wow.
Which is, it's cool. It really, really is. And that's what I mean. Like, it's so intimate.
Yeah.
Like you build these relationships with these people. You build these like, sales kind of CRM systems where like you're just like chits in a restaurant where you have all these people's information. You get notifications about their birthdays, their wives' birthdays, like all these things, right? And like you just send them little gifts. Like for me, it's so personal and it's so cool to be able to just call somebody and say, happy birthday or Happy New Year. Send them like
no strings attached. It's just like
like you just
you're
like,
thinking about them.
Yeah, I am, and it's like the hospitality aspect, and like of course like you could look at it as like there's a tactic behind it, right? Because like you
could.
Well, because I mean, it's just sales and marketing,
it's
right?
Staying
like
top of mind.
Like it's staying top of mind, right? Like how often do you see Coca-Cola fucking every day, all the time, everywhere? Like, and it's deliberate, and so like I've definitely done that like on purpose. Like I want to create these systems, right? If anyone would ever buy the company at some point, like and I were to leave it, then it would be worth nothing unless you can find a way to make this replicatable, which is, something that I worry about at the end of the day, because I'm just like, if somebody's not there to drive the standard all the time, like, what would it look like? But the other really cool part about even thinking about this thing is that like, while like I'm a good cook and whatnot, and I I say that humbly and stuff, like I'm like there are chefs out there that are way better than me. Like imagine a world in which I'm like, what if I had $200,000 to give to a chef for a salary for a year? Like how awesome of an experience could I give to our clients if I could pay somebody $150,000 to be the head chef, and I just focus on the business stuff? Like what if I could hire a chef that's even better than me that I can keep learning from?
Yeah.
So that's how I think about stuff. Like I have no use for money. It's like money's just dying sitting in your bank account. You have to use it, right? And so like I'm constantly just like using this thing to try to make the systems better for everyone that's involved, whether that's the experience that our clients have or
So at the moment, what's been on your mind as far as what's the next step or next way to generate the most amount of revenue aside from these private dining experiences?
Well, so we're going to be launching this this like subscription program for Instagram and YouTube and whatnot, right? I think I was mentioning earlier before we got on the mic was that we started posting on social media so that we could get more clients, so that people in Chicago could see it, and that was intentional, like that's what we wanted to do. But what ended up happening was just a ton of other private chefs and chefs in general started following us, and all of a sudden we went from having 5,000 followers to like we hit 10,000. And I remember exactly where we were when it happened, because we all kind of looked at each other and was like, oh, this is kind of crazy. Like 10,000 followers is such a big deal. And then the next year, like we're at 50. Like, and yeah, I know.
With that tipping point, would you attribute that to just consistency?
Consistency, man. We post 365.
We
post 365, and but like again,
is that
like,
yourself too, or is that a team?
No.
That's a
like
team.
I have people like
good for you.
Yeah, like I have people that they're filming during the while we're doing that, and then we just send that all to our social media manager.
And you share it. It's on your phone.
Yeah.
Right?
Just,
like a lot of people are like, oh, I don't have the fancy equipment. It's like you're not letting any of that stop you.
No. Like we're doing the best we can, and like I said, we've upgraded our system in terms of getting some nicer camera, and I just like production, so I want to get better at it, but yeah, no, like don't let that stop you. Like just film. I mean, like if you know Hormozy, you probably know Gary Vaynerchuk, right?
Yeah,
that guy's like the ultimate just freaking grab your phone and talk to it person. So, but that's kind of the next thing that we're working on, is kind of having this like subscription.
But you're not going through the platform school from Hormozy?
No, I haven't jumped on that yet, only because that kind of like you need everybody else to kind of also join. Like that's kind of the whole thing with school, is like you also need other people
for logins and things like that. Is that what you mean? Or?
No, I just mean like you need other people to join you on your thing. Like you need to kind of build a team for it, from my understanding of it. But maybe I haven't dived it, that deep into it, which I'm fine.
It's plenty of things. It's event planning.
Yeah.
There's forums, and then like the video based classroom type stuff.
I'd be interested, and I could look at it, but I think like we ended up finding this kind of niche thing where I'm just like, oh, well, there's people out there that really want to see how dishes are made from start to finish, and I really like making them, and I like making videos, and so we're we're going to double down on that and see how it goes. And maybe people are like, I don't want to pay a couple bucks a month to get access to this thing, and that's fine. Then I'll still post it for free.
You know what? YouTube is great too.
Especially
if you allow ads on it and you get monetized after a certain subscriber account, like YouTube money is good money.
Yeah, no, 100%, dude. I have friends that are just making 20, 30K a month. Just like,
oh my God.
Yeah. Just like, because I know other like food influencers, like they just do that full time, you know? And so that's cool. Like we're definitely trying to get to that point. But I think on a more technical sense, you know, like the thing is that with the private dining stuff, like it's definitely a seasonal thing, right? Where there's thousands of parties happening every day within the city of Chicago. Like that's like, it's more of a thing of like being known. And, but besides that, like, let's say, you know, maybe the last quarter is like super busy. Mm-hmm. And like for us, like last year we had a great year last year, and we thought that it was going to be slower in January, et cetera, and all that stuff. And it just kind of kept rolling through. And then, you know, Q2, Q3, 4 were all great. And then, but I, you know, had this notion of like, despite being really busy, I can only predict revenue so far ahead, right? So I started thinking, I'm like, how can I get some stuff that's like kind of, that I can at least like predict this, right? Just so I can keep everybody on staff all the time and get them paid. And I was just like, okay, like maybe we'll go a little bit into the corporate world, right? Like
catering?
Yeah, where I'm like, but it's very specific, right? Like I'm like, I have to work with very specific kind of people that A, have the budget, and B, care about the food, right? Like it can't just be a company that has a ton of, you know, that has 400 college kids that just want fried stuff, and they don't necessarily care about it, right? So like we're being very deliberate about the people that we're reaching out to and just saying, hey, we actually want to get on a contract with you guys to, you know, be able to, you know, be your Wednesday guy or Tuesday or whatever it is, right? Where it's like every week I'm coming to the same place. Like I do not want to navigate lower whacker. Like I want to come to the same place, talk to the same person every time, and do the drop offs and, you know, work with people that really care about the food, right? That want to nourish our team. And but I don't want to work with anybody that's like so big to where all of a sudden like they are, you know, 50% of your total revenue, and then all of a sudden like they drop you, or
you don't want to be too dependent.
Yeah. And so like, and I do not want to become a corporate caterer. Like that is not what we want to do at all. I'm merely just trying to get some predictable income just to be able to get everybody paid. Sure. And the food still has to be really good. I mean, it has to be like amazing staff meal is basically how I look at it, right? Where it's like, say Roister, for example, like we took that so seriously. Like we planned it out for weeks.
Who would be in charge? Would that be an opportunity to put someone give someone an opportunity to showcace their talent?
Yeah, totally.
Really? Okay.
Yeah, I think in some restaurants they have just a staff meal cook. Like there's like somebody designated just for that. But I don't know how it works for every business model, but for us it was like we were all responsible for, you know, it was like you have to make a salad, you know, a protein, a grain, a vegetable, etc., and a dessert, right? And like everybody would be responsible for one thing, and then you would choose what your thing was, and then you would add it to your list, and you could work with people on your team if you wanted to. But like that's what it is for me. I'm like pushing the idea of like eating whole foods, right? And like you know, just working with clients that really enjoy that same sentiment. So that's where we're at now.
What have you noticed about what makes a dinner party a really, really fun dinner party?
For me or for them?
What have you observed for them?
For them, I think they kind of like to be surprised in a way, which I think happens instinctively because they kind of don't know what's coming. And like, in a way, like I don't really know how to explain to them what's coming. Like I know it sounds crazy, but I'm just like, despite telling them like, hey, like we'll literally bring everything outside of this conversation. You won't have to lift a finger. It's like people like we'll have a dinner, and I hear this so many times. I'm not joking. Where they're like, I had no idea it was going to be like that, and I'm like, what did you think it was going to be? You know,
it's weird. They probably don't even have words to that. It's like they have an expectation, but they don't know how to describe it.
Somebody's coming to cook at my house, but I'm just like, no, we're providing plateware, glassware, silverware, you know, linen napkins, etc. Like I mean, there's a sommelier, like, you know, we have mixologists, etc. So like that level of excitement, and we always do something that's like an extra course or an extra thing, right? Like the cool thing about it is I have all the consultations myself, right? So when an inquiry comes in, they fill out certain things. So I have some information about them before I, ever get on the consultation. And then I ask them, certain questions like, what are you celebrating? Like, it'll be somebody's 40th birthday. And I'm like, what is something about so-and-so that is very personal to them that they would either get a laugh out of, or they would think it would be sentimental, or et cetera, right? And like, they'll tell me something that we'll incorporate it into it. Like sometimes, the person's like a really big reader, right? So like we'll turn the menu into like looking like chapters. Or there was somebody that was like a huge Breaking Bad fan. And so like one of the, like her husband literally like got Hank to do like a cameo just to like talk to her on it, which was like cool, right? Like during cocktail hour. And then, we got these buckets and printed the like Los Pollos Hermanos, like,
oh my God,
thing on it. Made
Dean
like
Norris, like just popping up like,
yeah. And, so we made like a fried chicken course for them that like, kind of, it was just fun. Right. And then like we made like rock candy to look like the meth and,
perfect.
and stuff like that. Like,
delight and surprise. Yeah.
So those little things, like the little personal touches really matter. And like, I am at, I would say probably 95% of all the events. Like there's times in which we double book, but for the most part, I try not to do that.
Where you have your team stretched out in multiple places.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
But for the most part, like we don't really do that. So, and we're just, we interact with them a lot. And like, the point of like talking about every single dish, like that definitely makes it a thing. I mean, there's sometimes where you'll have, somebody that's just like, it's a business meeting, or maybe they're just like really into like doing their own thing.
So your ability to read the room.
Yeah, that helps a lot. But I would say the majority of the time, people are really kind of invested and the experience that they're about to receive, and they like being, kind of interacting with you and asking questions, and it's cool. Like they definitely look at you as like the professional, right? Which I'm just like, you should act like the professional, because you are. Like lead this thing. Like knock on wood, like I'm very fortunate to say that we work with really amazing people and have not had to work with anybody that's really unpleasant. But I never feel like I'm like the help. You know what I mean? Like I hate the idea of like of showing up and just like cooking and then leaving. Like anytime that I have had to do that, it does not feel as fulfilling. So that part for sure makes it, when they're engaged and they're excited to be there, like it makes it that much more worth it for us too.
Have you noticed, aside from cooking, an ideal number of guests to make that dinner party most effective?
I feel like our sweet spot's anywhere between like 8 to 16.
16.
Like, oh, dude, we'll do.
It's hard to. I'm just saying,
parties,
I guess it's hard to connect with someone down the table.
Yeah, it is. But that's that's on them, right? Like,
yeah.
Like they're all friends. So they figure that part out.
Yeah.
But on our end, I mean, we'll do a 2-top. If they're willing to pay the minimum, we'll do a 2-top, and we did one last week, and that's so intimate. They're right in front of you. Like, obviously at those points we're not recording or anything, right? But it's like they're watching you make the thing. I mean, it's basically like an omakase. Like you're sitting in front of them, like you're having this interaction, and they're blown away. Like I would say in general, for anybody that's like in any field, if you feel like you're bored of talking about your own thing, right? Or if you feel like they're going to be bored hearing you talk about this thing, like this is the first time they're ever experiencing this stuff. Like the things that I'm saying to you right now, or the things that I've said within,
it's very novel to me.
It's novel to you, but it's not to me. I'm like, I'm saying this stuff because I've said it in my head and to other people on my team a gazillion times, right? So like doing it over and over again, like that's,
100%. I ask because I would love, I don't know what the number of like people I'd want there, but like I'd want to bring people that have been on the podcast together.
Oh, that'd be cool.
We've done that before. It wasn't a dinner. It was just like a little happy hour thing. But then as the podcast continues to grow, the number of guests continue to grow. And who am I to say I want this person and that person? I wish I could have everyone there.
Yeah.
So, but I know that there's an ideal number to make conversations efficient and effective.
Yeah, it's interesting. For sure, like we'd A, love to help, and B, we have relationships with venues and stuff too, so we can kind of help navigate that, and being able to bring everybody together. I do think that if you have a larger amount of people in the room, that it's easier for you to do something like past apps or stations or whatnot. But every time that I do a pop-up, which we don't get to do that many because you really have to plan that quite a time in advance, I notice that I'm like, the ones that are really successful is where I can like step away from the team. right? Like you have to be able to not run the thing and just be able to go and actually converse with people and tell the people on your team like, hey, like I'm going to need you to converse with these people because none of them know each other. So it has to be interactive. It's got to be fun, etc. But
yeah, maybe just another happy hour, but past apps or something. I don't know. Is there anything we haven't talked about that you'd like to share?
No, I mean, I feel like I have so many questions for you. I'm like, just in general, right?
Yeah.
I mean, like, it's one of these things where it's like, you're kind of interviewing me in a way, but I'm like, even with the, like where we're at right now and like this whole thing, like I had no idea what I was kind of really walking into. And it's, I mean, such a surprise, but it's like I was saying in the beginning, like I had no expectation of trying to get anything out of this. I just think it's so cool that you're willing to do this.
Yeah.
And
thank you.
Yeah, no, like, dude, and I'm jealous. Like, I swear to God, in a way, because like, I'm so obsessive about my work that I don't do anything else. And that's like where I'm just like, the fact that you get to not get to, but make the choice to step away from, all the endless possibilities of things that you could be doing to do this thing because you're so curious. It's just very admirable. And I think it's just so cool. Right. So like, I'm almost like, can you tell us a little bit about your journey and kind of like what sparked you to really get going and on interviewing random people that you've never met that you found either on the internet or wherever?
Yeah, it all spawned from a desire to learn about other industries because it came at a point where I felt like I was feeling like an imposter. Teaching something I was no longer a part of. And like you said earlier, I was a fan of Tim Ferriss, Gary Vaynerchuk, and Gary had this content creation model where you create long form content and slice it up into short form content. When I first started, 2018, I would find 5 to 6 clips. I would even tee you up to make clips.
Sure.
And I would post it. And I wanted to become a content creation machine. And these days, if I really wanted to continue to do that, there's software that would do that. They would find and transcribe everything and automate all those things. I just don't pay for it because I don't make any money from this. So
Sure.
I am manually rewatching everything, putting timestamps and chapter markers, and then finding the clip that I feel like would accurately be a trailer for the episode. So I'm not creating 5 to 6 clips. I'm just one big clip. So it's not, it probably, I'm done chasing the algorithm. I thoroughly do this for selfish reasons in the sense of I am genuinely curious about the individuals that we feel so lucky to have in our city. And, a similar sentiment to accolades and awards. Like there aren't really awards or accolades for podcasts in general, but, this prestige or being able to say I've met and talked with Chef Francis or whomever, and that feels good from time to time. But I'm not trying to like latch myself on to people either. That doesn't feel good. But I think a genuine curiosity as to why someone continues to do what they do, and I get to learn that, and you get to be a sounding board for some of the issues I have in my life, and then it gives me a world perspective of like, just because I'm dealing with this in my way, like, is there another way that someone else has been dealing with that issue, right? So it's been great.
Cool.
It's been great to have many people be sounding boards for me and to learn how you have found fulfillment or built fulfillment in your own life. A lot of that has come from entrepreneurs, people in their side hustles. A lot of the pandemic success stories. And it's been, but that being said, it's like I also bumped into people that love the corporate world, and so not everyone has to work to live. Some people live to work, right?
For sure.
And I agree. I think work, because we do spend a considerable amount of time working, it should at least be meaningful. It doesn't have to take up your whole life. Like your work doesn't have to be your complete identity, but you spend a good amount of time working, right? So why not make it count?
Yeah, but for me, it's like, define work, right? Like, and it's kind of what I was saying earlier about like, just being honest with yourself about what you want out of it. Like there's plenty of people that, might have a 9 to 5, but they want to do something else outside of it. Like the thing with Gary, like, which is why I really like where he's like, I have friends that, have 100 million in Facebook IPO, blah, blah, that are calling me and complain about how miserable they are. And then he's got a friend that,
makes 45K.
Makes 45K and is really pumped to be the coach for his son's little league. Like,
so
who's to say?
And
right?
that changes. That definition of fulfillment can change as you, like, we're trying to start a family. So when that family comes, like, that's going to change again. And how much of my life can I overlap with each other? Can I podcast with a kid on my lap? Like, can I teach? Can I bring my kid to
do it?
Right? I bring my dogs to work. So, like, you know, that ability can change things. But like you said at the very beginning, it's like being honest with yourself, identifying what you really want. You know, you can't have 5 things, right? You really got to hone in on that one thing.
You know, it's an interesting kind of concept that I feel like I really think about all the time, that I think I say it, it's just kind of everyone around me, where it's like, I don't look at a thing as necessarily like being good or bad, and just more look at it as like, it just is. Yeah. Right. Yeah. So it's like, nothing's good or bad except our thinking makes it so, right? Like, it's someone, so, man, I feel like it's such a powerful thing too, because I'm just like whose ideology am I living with? And this is like a topic that's come around in my own life too, where like I start to become aware of like, when did I first interact with this thought, and when did I start to believe it to be true? You know, and that's kind of really freeing, because you're like, you know what, like, I can think about this differently. And you know, in my line of work, and at least with my experience thus far, like, it's kind of been one mentality. But that's why I'm so curious about your thing too, especially when I found out about you, because I'm like, oh, like, they're not a culinary person interviewing other culinary people. Like, this person's just genuinely interested in other people, and like, I mean, people are just so brilliant. Like, I am just blown away by how amazing people are. And I think, you know, the news has a really interesting way of making you feel like the world's such a bad place and all this stuff. But I think, you know, by and large, like, we're super dope. Like, the fact that we're here doing what we're doing is incredible. And these people just blow my mind all of the time. I'm so impressed by human beings. Like, net score is like,
that's amazing.
We're winning.
It's
truly.
Very optimistic.
Yeah, it is. You know.
And to add on to what you said about just your perspective, and to understand what you know to be true, or just to be what is. It made me think of an episode by Naval Ravikant that he did with Kapil Gupta, and the title of the episode is Conquering the Mind. It's like a 40-minute episode, one of those game changer, mind-shifting episodes. And it rubs people the wrong way if they're not ready to realize like what life is. Right?
Yeah, and I mean, I'm like, you can define it you can define it your own way. I think like that's the other part that I really like about it, where it's like, I can choose what this thing means to me. I really don't have to live it in this like kind of
victim mentality.
Yeah, I mean, you know, the thing about that is like, it's just so real. Like, a lot of your excuses or your life circumstances are real. Yeah. Like, they're real. Like, they're valid. You know, like, is just more of like what are you gonna do about it? And like, dude, trust me, like, it's very easy to say it, and then there's days where I'm just like, God, dude, I just want to throw it all away.
It is so easy to just do nothing.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it's really easy to sit here and be motivational, but then it's like, you know, conquering your own kind of demons and your own thoughts. Like, that's, I think, the coolest part about this entire like life thing to me, is that like, everybody is the same. Like, that's why I'm not sitting here like comparing struggles, where I'm just like, you just don't know any better, right? Like, like, I was saying that earlier where I was like, oh, okay, well, I was growing up, you know, I grew up in Albania, and people were poor and et cetera. But it's just like, if somebody doesn't know that exists, like, I was happy, right? Like, you could live on the south side of Chicago and, you know, take the blue line or the red line up and just be like, oh, okay, like, this is a different world. Like, this exists, and you at least have like that differentiation. Like, for me, it's like, I had no idea. Like, I don't know, man. I really think, you know, more than anything, I think I want to empower people, and let them know just how incredible they are. And like, you know, no matter where they are, no matter like what situation that they're in, that they can come out of it. And there's enough evidence to support that. In the same way that I was, you know, kind of saying earlier about like, you know, people come from all sorts of different backgrounds, and that like, you know, I made like the American Idol comment about, everybody, that goes on there is just like, oh my God, like, my mom worked 2 jobs. Like I came from this, like, and I'm just like, that is just so like, we're all like that. Like there's more people that come from that than not. Like that's the whole idea of the 1% where it's like these people have, like, I can't relate to that because I didn't come from that, but I can relate with a lot of you guys about the struggles that you came up with. And yet, no matter what, like you can find examples of people that came from your situation or even worse that that made it. And that part to me is like I try to hang on to that as much as possible.
It's grounding.
Yeah. There's a better day. Like you can make it through. Like there's times where it's just so hard, man. Like we were talking about that earlier. Like the highs are high and it feels cool, but the lows are low and like God, I feel like I keep like coming back to this Hormozy stuff, but he talks about like the Rocky cut scene where it's just like, in the Rocky cut scene, like the hard part of him training lasts 5 minutes, but in real life, like that's like 5 years. Like sometimes you're in the shits for 5 years, right? And like I can look back at the times that I had in restaurants and just say, wow, I learned so much and I had these amazing experiences with all these people. But there's times where you're like, where I'm just like, dude, this is freaking hard and I actually don't want to be here. And there's so many times where I'm just like, I'm not getting ahead, I'm not where I want to be, I'm not, et cetera, and I just wanting to quit. I mean, there's so many parts of it that are just so hard.
How many times did it come to just a decision to persevere despite the feeling, right?
Dude, daily. Like I think about that every, like I'll go to the gym every day. Like I never feel like it. It's like I have to show up to feel like it, right? Like where people think like, I have to feel like it, so then I do it. For me, it's like I have to do it so I feel like it. Yeah. It's like every time that I'm feeling super anxious about work stuff, I'm like, oh, it's actually like, because I'm not doing it. The moment I sit down and start doing the work, I immediately start feeling better. If I go to the gym and I start working out in 5 minutes, I'm like, oh, okay, cool. Like I can get the same. But like when I wake up in the morning and I feel like I'm tired and it's cold out in Chicago and I don't want to get out of bed, like I just get out of bed despite of how I'm feeling. And within 10 minutes, I'm like, yeah, we're good. And it's every day. Like, it's not like like I've just calloused my mind. This is not like a David Goggins thing where it's like, I'm just like, I figured it out. Every day I don't feel like doing it. And like, I do it either way. Yeah.
It's reassuring to hear that. Yeah.
Yeah. Keep crushing.
Any other thoughts before we hop off?
I don't think so, man. I think this has been great.
You were saying, you're like, I'm jealous you get to do this. Well, if you ever feel compelled to hop on, and it doesn't have to be with me, if you feel like there's a concept or a theme that's going on that you feel like the world should know about, just let me know. Awesome. And then you can take over.
I appreciate it. I think I only said that because I'm like, I'm so obsessed with my thing that it's like there's a million things. Like there's other things I hypothetically
you're gonna go home. You're like, I wish I said that. I wish that always happens. But this doesn't have to be the last time.
We'll do a part 2, man. Well, it's like,
where can people find you and contact you?
Our website is probably one of where you can get a lot of information. And that's vendador.com. Otherwise, you can find us through all social media stuff.
How'd you come up with the name Vendador?
Vendador. Vendador Chicago is mostly what you'll find. But so we grew up like in Albania. We learned Italian as a second language because it's so close. And so like I've got a lot of like a Latin base, and like I really like language and roots and stuff like that. Vendador is basically like, it means a vendor that has an intimate product. So vendor, like all like the Latino folks that I run across, I've been loaded. Like I'm like, yes. It's exactly a vendor, if you will. So that's kind of how I came up with that. I have no idea why I wanted to call it that. I did. And like, dude, like I'm like, I wish people knew, where I'm like, it's all an idea until you do it. And then all of a sudden, like, it's real. Like I was listening to your podcast about the dude that was here yesterday about, what is it? The not chips, but
the snacks. Yeah.
Right. Where he's like, dude, seeing your stuff in like somebody's cart or like in another, and I'm just all of a sudden you're just like, oh, okay, cool. Like this is real. Like you're like, I have a payment processor and somebody just gave me money. Like, this is crazy. So, if you're listening to this, chase your dreams for sure. You can do it. If anybody else can do it, you can do it.
Agreed.
Yeah.
All right, guys. Thanks for tuning in. We will catch you in the next episode. Till then, see ya.
Peace.
Hey, what's up, guys? Thanks for tuning in. If you like this video, you might even like this video. If you haven't subscribed, please subscribe right here. I'll see you in the next one.